One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For the first time in 50 years, we're going back to the moon. Now, this video is not about conspiracy theories. It's not about the Apollo 1 incident. It's not about beating the Soviet Union to space. It's not about the debunked videos about Buzz Aldrin saying we didn't go to the moon. Today, we're talking about the future moon landing and what it means for humanity. So why are we going to the moon in the first place? It's to establish a permanent residence there, to facilitate missions to Mars and beyond, and to inspire future generations for deep space exploration. Why do we want to go to Mars and beyond? To expand humanity to another planet for species survival, for scientific research to understand the evolution of Mars, and to further explore the cosmos to find alien life. Well, why do we want to find alien life? Well, it'll teach us how to prepare for the future, and to answer three fundamental concepts which determine the fate of humanity: the Fermi paradox, the Great Filter, and the truth behind abiogenesis. We will now go back into time to a moment where I explain these concepts. So, the Fermi paradox suggests that mathematically, if the chances of biology existing in other parts of the universe in the galaxy, so if biology is a planetary phenomenon that occurs naturally, if life is so extraordinary, the chances of it being out there are so high, how come we're not in contact with it? The amount of stars in the observable universe is 8 with 23 zeros after it. So if we were to compare that to sand, okay? So on all of the beaches, on all the continents on planet Earth, there's 7.5 to the 18th power of sand on all the beaches. That means that there's more stars in the universe than there is sand on all of the beaches on planet Earth. The Great Filter, what it means is it's the point within the universe where it's an impossible transition between non-biology and biology, where non-living things become living things. In science, we call it abiogenesis. It's also known as the origin of life. On April 21st, 1961, the search for these answers began when the Soviet Union sent the first human being to space. 8 years later, in July of 1969, 650 million people watched as the US sent Apollo 11 into space and the first human walked on the moon. Neil Armstrong, followed by Buzz Aldrin, while Michael Collins operated the command module. Since then, there have only been 3 nations to land on the moon: the USA, the Soviet Union, and China. There has only been one nation to ever walk on the moon: America. 10 humans have walked on the moon since Apollo 11. And that would be on Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, and the last one in 1972, Apollo 17. Now, some people say that we haven't been back to the moon since because aliens told us not to come back. But again, this video is not about conspiracy theories. The logical explanation is because costs are astronomically high and there's been political pushback. But this all changed on December 11th, 2017, when President Trump signed the Space Policy Directive 1, a national space policy led by the US and partners for humans to return to the moon, followed by missions to Mars and beyond. 2 years later, in May 2019, NASA announced that this program would be named Artemis, the goddess of the moon in Greek mythology, and twin sister of Apollo. The purpose of Artemis is to return to the moon for scientific discovery, economic benefits, and inspiration for a new generation of explorers. So there's a few key components to Artemis. There's the Space Launch System rocket, the Orion spacecraft, which is an improvement of Apollo in every way possible, the Lunar Gateway Space Station, which is humanity's first space station to orbit the moon to help support deep space exploration, and then the Commercial Human Landing System, which is what astronauts will use to land on the moon. And you may already know who's building the HLS for Artemis: SpaceX. They were awarded the contract in April 2021. You might remember pushback from that time when Blue Origin, owned by Jeff Bezos, protested the award and sued NASA and lost. But SpaceX's HLS will be a key component to the Artemis missions, in combination with the 3 space agencies we partnered with: the European Space Agency, which is composed of 22 countries, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency. So the first Artemis mission already happened in November 2022. Artemis 1. We sent Artemis to orbit the moon without a crew and it was to test the new SLS rocket, the Orion spacecraft, and the new heat shield that is used for re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. It was a successful mission, but the heat shield did have some damage that was unexpected, just due to the high temperatures of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit and going 24,000 plus miles per hour as it re-entered the atmosphere. The second mission is Artemis 2, set to launch in November of 2024. It'll have the same objectives as Artemis 1, but it'll have a crew this time of 4. It's also not going to be landing on the moon either. Just recently, on April 2023, NASA announced who the crew members will be on Artemis 2 and 3. And if all goes well, then Artemis 3 is set to launch in December 2025. This time they will land on the moon. They'll launch from the Kennedy Space Center, and they'll fly to the moon where SpaceX's HLS will be waiting for them. Orion will dock onto SpaceX, transfer 2 astronauts to it, and then the HLS will descend down to the south polar region of the moon. They'll collect samples in Starship for 6.5 days, which is just enough time for Orion to do 1 orbit around the moon with the other 2 astronauts. They'll do a series of moonwalks to take pictures and videos, survey geology, retrieve samples, and gather other data required for the mission. After 6.5 days, the HLS will bring them back up to Orion. They'll spend another 6 days transferring data samples between the vehicles and preparing for their flight back to Earth. Then they'll fly back to Earth, re-enter Earth's atmosphere at nearly 25,000 miles an hour, and 11 parachutes will land them safely in the Pacific Ocean, where the US Navy and Coast Guard will retrieve them. It will be a nerve-wracking mission. It will be a successful mission. There will be angry people who oppose space agencies spending money on space things and not Earth things. The mission will inspire a new generation of space explorers who will one day lead our species to become a multi-planet civilization. A civilization that is thriving and bearing and daring to expand into the cosmos. We must go to the moon and Mars and beyond. This is the way.